Most people think famine means no food at all. But history tells a darker story. Because when disaster hit America, people did eat. But what they ate was almost unbelievable. Some boiled leather just to survive. Some ground tree bark into flour. Some lived for weeks on foods so desperate they were never meant for humans. And one survival meal on this list was so disturbing, people refused to speak about it for generations. Stay until number 3, because it may be the strangest disaster food ever recorded. And number 1, it wasn't really food. It was strategy. It was survival. When crops failed, storms destroyed towns, and war cut off supply lines, Americans learned a brutal truth. Hunger makes people invent the impossible. This is not a story about recipes. This is a story about what humans do when the world falls apart. Because these were not meals. This was survival. Number 12. Acorn bread. To most people today, acorns are something squirrels collect. But during crop failures across frontier America, families turned them into food. When wheat ran out and corn stores were empty, people gathered acorns by the sack. They cracked them, crushed them, washed out the bitter tannins in creek water, then dried the mash into rough flour. From that, they made survival bread. It was dense, bitter, heavy as stone, but it filled the stomach. And that was enough. For many poor families, acorn bread was the difference between seeing winter or not. This was not cooking. This was strategy. Number 11. Salt pork scraps. During economic collapse, meat was a luxury. Fresh beef? Impossible. Chicken? Gone. But salt pork scraps, fat trimmings, skin, gristle, could sometimes still be found. People boiled scraps for hours into greasy broth, sometimes adding beans, sometimes nothing at all. Children dipped stale bread into the surface oil just to get calories. The meal looked miserable. But fat meant energy. Energy meant labor. Labor meant survival. And in disasters, survival was everything. The shocking part? Some families lived months on little else. This was not food. This was fuel. Number 10. Tree bark flour. Yes, actual bark. During severe shortages, inner bark from pine and elm was stripped, dried, and pounded into meal. The soft cambium layer could be mixed into dough, sometimes with corn dust, sometimes alone. Imagine baking bread from trees. Imagine feeding that to children. That happened. And when stomachs were empty enough, it worked. It tasted woody, rough, almost impossible to chew, but it stopped hunger for another day. That was enough, and historians often overlook this. But desperate people don't care about taste. They care about tomorrow. Number 9. Leather soup. This sounds impossible, until starvation makes it real. During isolated disasters, people boiled old leather harnesses, belts, boots, even saddle straps, for hours, sometimes days. The goal wasn't flavor. It was extracting whatever collagen or grease remained. The result was foul, rubbery, nearly inedible. But hunger changes the rules. A mother feeding leather broth to children sounds unthinkable. Until there is no flour, no meat, no help, then it becomes survival. This was not a meal. This was resistance against death. Number 8. Mush and molasses. In poor American communities, especially during depressions, cornmeal mush became survival itself. Cornmeal boiled into paste, molasses added for cheap energy. Breakfast, lunch, dinner, same bowl, again and again. Children grew up on it, workers survived on it, entire households lived off pennies. It wasn't varied, it wasn't healthy, but it kept people standing. And sometimes, standing is all survival asks. Here's what no one tells you. Many famine foods weren't bizarre. They were ordinary foods stretched to the edge of human endurance. That's what makes them terrifying, because disaster often doesn't look dramatic. Sometimes it looks like eating the same desperate bowl every day for months. Number 7. Roasted rats. Yes, and during urban crises it happened. When city poverty became extreme, some desperate communities hunted rats, skinned them, cooked them over open fire. The stigma was overwhelming. But starvation ignores shame. Protein is protein when there's nothing left. Records from poor districts tell stories people later tried to bury because it sounded too ugly, too humiliating. But hunger has no pride. This was not food. This was survival. Number 6. Dandelion stew. What most people call weeds, others call dinner. Dandelion greens were boiled into bitter stew, roots were roasted, leaves mixed into soups. During shortages, fields became grocery stores. Wild greens saved lives, and poor families knew every edible plant around them. Knowledge was survival. One wrong leaf meant poison. One right leaf meant another day. This was not gardening. This was strategy. Number 5. Corncob meal. This is where things change, because this wasn't just using corn. It was using what was left after corn was gone. Even cobs, dry cobs were crushed, ground, mixed into meal extenders. Imagine being so desperate you grind what others throw away and eat it. That happened across famine zones, across disaster regions, because hunger does not waste, not even scraps. And what comes next gets even darker. Number 4. Possum stew. When livestock disappeared and stores were empty, people hunted whatever moved. And in rural America, possums became emergency food. Caught at night, skinned by hand, boiled for hours to soften tough meat. Sometimes cooked with roots, sometimes with nothing at all. To outsiders it sounded shocking. To starving families, it was dinner. This was not preference. This was survival. And what makes this powerful is how common it once was. Thousands did this quietly, because famine rarely looks heroic. It looks practical. Number 3. Sawdust bread. This may be one of the strangest foods in survival history. And yes, people really mixed sawdust into bread. Not pure wood shavings from a workshop, but finely ground cellulose fillers, bark meal, and wood fibers added to stretch flour. The purpose was simple. Make one sack of flour last longer. Double it. Triple it. Feed more mouths. The result was terrible. Dry, harsh. Almost impossible to digest. But empty stomachs don't reject what full stomachs mock. Imagine handing children bread made partly from wood and praying it keeps them alive. This was not baking. This was desperation shaped into food. And if you think that sounds extreme, wait until number 2. Number 2. Shoestring soup. In some recorded disasters, people made soup from almost nothing. Potato peels, onion skins, old bones boiled again and again, sometimes scraps so thin they were called shoestrings, because they looked like strings floating in water. It was barely soup, barely nourishment, but warmth can trick hunger, and hope can ride inside a pot. Families passed around one kettle, everyone taking little, no one full, but no one collapsing today. And sometimes, that was enough. This was not food. This was resistance. Here's the real reason these existed. People didn't eat these because they were ignorant. They ate them because systems failed. Supply chains broke. Governments reacted late. Weather destroyed harvests. War took men and food. And ordinary people did what ordinary people always do. They adapted. That is the hidden story of survival. Number 1. Famine ash cakes. This was perhaps the purest symbol of desperation. A cake made from rough emergency meal, sometimes mixed with acorn flour, sometimes bark, sometimes whatever could bind together. Flattened, placed directly in hot ashes, baked in coals, pulled out blackened, brushed off, eaten. No plates, no kitchen, just fire. Ash cakes fed refugees, settlers, disaster survivors, people on the move, people with nothing. And that is why it reaches number 1. Because it wasn't just a food. It was a system for surviving collapse. Portable, simple, possible. When everything else failed, this remained. This was not cooking. This was strategy. And when you step back, a disturbing truth appears. The foods people laugh at in comfort were often the foods that kept people alive in catastrophe. Acorns, bark, leather, rats, wood bread, ash cakes. These sound unbelievable, but they happened. Because hunger is the greatest inventor in human history. It turns weeds into meals, scraps into fuel, and impossible things into survival. But there's one question few ask. Could modern people survive this? Could we identify wild food, stretch flour, cook over ashes, use what nothing offers? Most people think disaster means stocking canned goods. History says survival often looks much stranger and much harder. This was not food. This was endurance. And maybe the most haunting part, some of these methods may return in future crises. Economic collapse, climate disasters, supply shortages. History rarely stays buried. It repeats. Which of these shocked you most? Could you eat any of them to survive? Comment below. And if you want more forgotten survival foods from American history, stay with me. Because the next list gets even darker. Most people assume the worst survival foods were already on the list. They weren't. Because what comes next wasn't just strange, it was psychological. These were foods people ate when hunger broke normal human thinking. And some of them sound impossible. But they were real. This was not cooking. This was strategy. Another forgotten survival food. People used what existed. Because hunger teaches a brutal rule. Because famine foods were not always disgusting. Some became culture. Some became tradition. Some survived long after disasters ended. Because survival leaves recipes behind. That's why certain poor man meals still exist in America today. Cornbread, beans, molasses dishes, wild green. They began in struggle, then became heritage. That is the hidden legacy of hunger. Another dark survival food. That was enough. Which of these extreme foods shocked you the most? Could you survive on any of them? Comment below.